The sun was already beginning to set when Anna finally closed the door to her new apartment. The building was old, with that decadent charm of a place that had witnessed many stories, but to her, it was a symbol of a fresh start. After some tough months, Anna just wanted a place to reconnect with herself, where she could heal from the emotional scars she had accumulated. This small apartment, on the 4th floor of an unassuming building, seemed like the perfect place for that. Boxes were still scattered around the living room, and the space smelled of fresh paint and aged wood. She looked out the window, seeing the quiet street below, and took a deep breath. There was a faint sense of freedom. Finally, she had something that felt like hers. The silence of the building was comforting. No hustle and bustle, no noise from cars or neighbors shouting. Just the welcoming quiet of a new life beginning. As she organized a few things, Anna could hear only the distant sound of the city calming down, an almost comforting noise that resembled the whisper of a peaceful night. She smiled, content. Everything was as it should be. Nothing could disturb that moment of peace. Still, in the days that followed, Anna noticed small details that seemed out of place but initially gave her no cause for concern. At night, for example, she would hear noises coming from the apartment above, footsteps dragging slowly across the wooden floor, creaks as if something heavy was being moved. Maybe it was the neighbor rearranging furniture, she thought. She didn't pay much attention to it. In old buildings like that, sounds traveled in strange ways. But the sounds always came late at night when everything seemed to be in deep silence. The kind of noise that, instead of fading away, started to catch her attention. But Anna, determined to focus on her new beginning, ignored it, convincing herself it was just the building showing its age. On the second day, as she climbed the stairs, she crossed paths with a middle-aged man in the hallway. He was standing in front of the elevator, with a subtle smile on his face. Anna greeted him politely, and he responded with a simple nod. That must be the neighbor from upstairs, she thought. Night fell again, and the noises started up once more. But, just like the previous day, Anna didn't let herself worry. After all, moving to a new place always came with a period of adjustment. She wrapped herself in the comforter, trying to get cozy in her new space, hoping sleep would come quickly. As sleep finally approached, a sharper sound made her open her eyes for a moment, something like the faint shuffle of feet right above her, as if the neighbor was moving from one side to the other. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and went back to sleep, not wanting to give it more importance than it deserved. Little did she know, that apartment wasn't the safe haven she imagined. On the third day after moving in, Anna decided to explore the neighborhood. The area seemed calm, and the sunny day helped dispel any lingering unease she might have felt over the past few days. She returned home in the middle of the afternoon, carrying a few grocery bags, and as she approached the building, she saw the man she had met in the hallway. He was standing at the entrance, as if waiting for her. Anna tried not to seem uncomfortable as she approached. "Hey, you must be the new tenant, right?" He smiled in a friendly way, but something in his gaze seemed hesitant, as if he were sizing her up. "Yes, I just moved in," she replied politely, forcing a smile. "Marcelo. I live in the apartment upstairs. If you need anything, just let me know." He extended his hand casually. Anna accepted the handshake, though it lasted a bit longer than she expected. She thanked him and headed up to her apartment. It wasn't a big deal, but something about the way he looked at her made her feel slightly uneasy. Once inside, she tried to shake off the strange feeling. It was normal to feel that way in a new environment, especially when she didn't know anyone in the building. Marcelo was probably just trying to be nice. However, the following days brought a growing sense of discomfort. Marcelo started appearing frequently in the hallways, the garage, and even in the elevator, always with a smile and some excuse to start a conversation. At first, Anna thought it was nothing more than a coincidence. After all, it was a small building, and casual encounters were bound to happen. But soon, she began to notice a pattern. He always seemed to know when she was coming or going, and each time they met, his questions became more personal. "So, how do you like the neighborhood? Have you met many people around here?" he asked one afternoon as she struggled to open the door with grocery bags in her hands. Anna responded quickly, with forced politeness, before entering her apartment. Now, that friendly smile felt more like an unwelcome invitation into something she didn't want to share. The nights continued to be marked by the sounds coming from the apartment above. It wasn't just footsteps. At times, there were small creaks, as if something was being dragged or knocked repeatedly. Anna was beginning to get annoyed, but she didn't know how to approach the issue. She didn't want to be the neighbor who complains right after moving in. Besides, Marcelo was always so polite. How could she confront him about something that seemed so trivial? The following week, Anna spent a sleepless night. She was lying in bed, almost ready to drift off, when she clearly heard the sound of something lightly tapping against the ceiling. It was in the bedroom and seemed to come directly from Marcelo's apartment. The sounds were repetitive, as if he were moving furniture, but the timing didn't make sense. It was past midnight. The next morning, Anna went out for coffee at the corner cafe, trying to forget the previous night's annoyance. When she returned, Marcelo was at the entrance again, as if waiting for her. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, with a smile that she was beginning to find increasingly unsettling. Yeah," Anna replied, unable to hide the lie. Something inside her didn't want to admit that he was bothering her. A growing sense of distrust lingered, but she couldn't yet pinpoint its source. He looked at her for a moment longer than necessary and, before heading inside, said something that made Anna's spine tingle. "You know, sometimes when the building's quiet, it's easy to hear what's going on in other apartments. Kind of creepy, isn't it?" Anna quickly entered her apartment, her heart racing faster than usual. His words echoed in her mind. It's easy to hear what's going on in other apartments. The days began to pass with a constant sense of unease. Every time Anna left or returned to the apartment, it seemed like Marcelo was always nearby, even if it was just a shadow in the corner of the hallway or a silent presence near the entrance. He never physically invaded her space, but his constant presence was starting to weigh on her. The conversations, once just awkward, now felt like small interrogations. "I noticed you weren't home last night," he casually remarked during one of their coincidental encounters in the hallway. "Were you out for a walk?" A chill ran down Anna's spine. He knew her schedule. He knew when she was and wasn't home. She forced a smile, trying to stay calm. "Yeah, I went out to dinner with a friend," she lied, quickly walking past him. That night, as she lay down, Anna couldn't shake the discomfort she felt about Marcelo. Something was off about him, something she couldn't put into words, but it set her intuition on high alert. Even so, she tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just a lonely neighbor, someone who didn't know how to socialize properly. However, the noises at night intensified. Now, besides the sounds of footsteps and furniture being moved, Anna heard what sounded like whispers coming from the ceiling. She forced herself to believe it was just the building's strange acoustics, but the voices seemed oddly articulated, though unintelligible. The next day, Anna decided to take action. She climbed the stairs to Marcelo's apartment, determined to politely ask about the noises. When she knocked on the door, there was no answer. She knocked again, harder, but the door remained shut. She pressed her ear against the wood, trying to hear any sound inside, but everything was silent. Weird, she thought. He always seemed to be around, but now, when she wanted to talk to him, there was no sign of life. Frustrated, she went back down to her apartment, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched. Later that night, while watching a movie to relax, Anna noticed something strange. A reflection on her TV screen, subtle, but there. She paused the movie and looked around. Nothing seemed out of place. Yet, the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Then Anna realized. The upper corner of the room, where the wall met the ceiling, looked slightly off. A small dark spot. Curious, she moved closer. As she approached, she saw it was a tiny opening, no, a lens. Her heart raced. She was being filmed. Anna backed away slowly, unable to believe what she was seeing. There was a hidden camera in her apartment. How had she not noticed it before? She frantically scanned the room, searching for more. And, after a more thorough search, she found another camera in the hallway, disguised among the decorations of the light fixture. Her stomach turned. Marcello. It had to be him. She rushed out of the apartment, her heart pounding wildly, and went upstairs to confront him. This time, she wasn't leaving without answers. When she reached his door, she pounded on it forcefully, a mix of fear and anger rising inside her. Again, silence. Anna knocked harder, almost banging on the door now, when she finally heard the sound of something moving inside. The door slowly creaked open, and there stood Marcello, his face lit by an eerily calm expression. "Can I help you?" he asked, as if nothing was wrong. Anna felt the words catch in her throat. How could he pretend so well? How could he have the audacity to act as if nothing had happened? "You," Anna began, trying to control her anger and fear. "Did you put cameras in my apartment?" Marcello looked at her for a long, unsettling moment before smiling softly. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe. It's a dangerous neighborhood, you know." Anna's blood ran cold. He knew. Anna's blood ran cold at Marcello's response. He watched her with a calm smile, as if his invasion of her privacy was something trivial, almost an act of kindness. The world seemed to close in on her, and the air in her lungs was trapped. How dare he do this? Install cameras in her home? How could he act like he was doing something benign? She took a step back, her head spinning with a wave of emotions, anger, fear, and an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. "I didn't ask for this," Anna nearly shouted, her voice trembling with indignation. Marcello shrugged, as if the situation was entirely under control. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay. You live alone, I thought you'd appreciate a little extra help." He emphasized that last phrase, making Anna's stomach churn. It was as if he was being condescending, manipulating her into accepting something grotesque as a gesture of kindness. Anna quickly turned and rushed down the stairs. She had to get out of there. Her mind was racing, trying to find a solution, a way to escape Marcello's suffocating presence. When she made it back to her apartment, she locked the door, breathing heavily as panic began to take over. She looked around, her eyes scanning every corner of the room. Every object now seemed like a possible hiding place for another camera. What if there were more she hadn't found? What if he had been watching her for days, weeks, months? The thought sickened her. Anna grabbed her phone and tried to call the police. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. When she finally dialed, the operator's voice on the other end was cold and objective, asking her to describe the situation. "My neighbor, he put hidden cameras in my apartment," she said, her voice breathless. The response was quick and bureaucratic. They would send someone to check, but it would take time. The delay made her feel even more vulnerable. As she waited, Anna decided she couldn't stay there. She closed the windows, locked all the doors, and hid in the bedroom, her back against the wall, knees drawn up to her chest. She was on the edge of reason and panic, trying to keep control of her mind while fear gripped her body. The apartment's silence was now deafening. Every little sound made her heart race. Every creak in the old building, every distant rustle of the wind, felt like a prelude to something worse. She didn't know how much time had passed until she heard the sound that made her stop breathing. Footsteps. Anna held her breath, pressing herself against the wall in the bedroom. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, echoing down the hallway outside. Someone was out there. No, it can't be, she thought. It's too late for any neighbor. But she knew who it was. She felt his presence on the other side of the door, like an invisible shadow suffocating her. She crawled to the bedroom door and stayed still, her ear pressed against the wood. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was terrifying. Then, something knocked on the front door. 3 soft, rhythmic taps. A chill ran down her spine. She tried to ignore it, but the knocking continued, growing louder with each beat. Terror gripped Anna's chest, but she forced herself to stand. She had to move. She couldn't stay there waiting. She grabbed her bag, her keys, and tiptoed to the door. Her plan was to leave through the back entrance, but just as she turned the doorknob, the knocking abruptly stopped. Everything fell into a deep, eerie silence. Anna waited, her heart pounding too hard. And just before she could react, a voice whispered from the other side of the door, low and laced with insinuation. "I know you're there, Anna." She swallowed hard, her whole body in panic. Marcelo was on the other side. There was no doubt anymore. Anna froze. Marcelo's voice echoed through the door, low, sinister, filled with an implicit threat. The softness of his words was even more unsettling than a scream would have been. He was so close, just on the other side of the door, knowing she was there. Her heart pounded so hard in her chest that she could feel it, as if it were trying to escape her body. She had to act quickly, without hesitation. In one swift, silent motion, she grabbed her bag and decided to climb out the kitchen window, which led to a service area. She didn't know where she would go, but she needed to get out of that apartment before something worse happened. The silence on the other side of the door made her believe he might be waiting, watching, testing her limits. With trembling hands, Anna unlocked the window, pushing it open slowly to avoid making any noise. She swung one leg over the edge, balancing herself, and looked toward the corridor that led to the fire escape. Once outside the apartment, she began to descend as quickly as possible, trying to control her breathing. When she reached the ground floor, she ran out of the building. The cool night air hit her sharply, but it brought no relief. The feeling of being watched persisted, as if Marcelo was hidden somewhere, just waiting for the right moment to act. She walked down the street, aimless, until she realized that her apartment building was no longer safe. She needed somewhere to stay, someone to help her, but who? She was alone in the city, and the police would take time to respond to her report. Desperate, Anna decided to head to a police station, but first, she needed some evidence to accuse him. Her apartment was infested with cameras, and now that she knew that, she realized there must be a place where Marcelo controlled them from. A terrible thought hit her: what if he was using his own apartment as the base? Going back there seemed risky, but Anna knew that without proof, she couldn't do much. She pulled out her phone and began searching for information on how to detect hidden cameras. On the way, her eyes fixed on the windows of the building. Marcelo's apartment was dark, but something in her gut urged her to go back and investigate. When she returned to the building, she climbed the stairs quietly, carefully, to avoid making any noise that might alert him. As she reached Marcelo's floor, she noticed his door was slightly ajar. Her stomach churned. What was he planning? With her heart in her throat, Anna gave the door a gentle push. The inside of the apartment was dark, except for a faint light coming from a room at the back. She stepped inside, moving slowly, the floor creaking beneath her feet. Her instinct screamed for her to leave, but the need to find out what he was hiding was stronger. In the center of the room, there was a small table with several monitors. Each one displayed a different view of her apartment. Anna recognized every room. There was the camera from the living room, the one in the hallway, and one in the bedroom. She could barely breathe as she saw her own image projected there, like a twisted reality show. But then, something even worse caught her attention. On one of the monitors, the camera showed a room she didn't recognize. The image was dark, but slowly she could make something out. It was a bedroom, and there were photographs on the walls. Photos of her. In various situations. At the grocery store, leaving for work, and even while she slept. She recognized the pajamas she had worn the night before. Her legs almost gave out. Marcelo wasn't just spying on her. He had been following her, documenting her every move. This was an obsession far beyond anything she could have imagined. Her stomach churned with the revelation. Anna heard the faint creak of a door behind her. Marcelo was there, standing at the entrance to the room, with a calm and sickening look on his face. "I told you, I just wanted to make sure you were safe," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Now do you understand?" Anna could no longer move, fear paralyzing her. He moved closer, and with every step he took, the air around her grew heavier. Anna was paralyzed, terror coursing through her veins as Marcelo advanced with slow, calculated steps. Every move he made seemed to carry an implicit threat, as if he were waiting for her to react so he could savor her vulnerability. The smile he wore was cold, devoid of any human empathy. He wasn't just an invasive neighbor, Marcelo was a predator, and Anna was the prey. She glanced at the monitors, the images of her apartment still flickering on the screens. He had violated every corner of her privacy, turning her life into a sick spectacle for his sadistic eyes. Fear gave way to a rising wave of anger, a survival instinct screaming in her mind. She needed to fight. "You think you can do this to me?" she whispered, trying to mask the fear with a bravery she barely felt. Her voice was shaky, but there was a note of determination in it. Marcelo paused for a moment, tilting his head as if analyzing her reaction. Then, he smiled again, but this time there was something even more sinister in that gesture. "Do you really think you can escape me?" he asked, taking another step forward, blocking the door. "I've always been here, watching, protecting you. Now, finally, you know the real me." Adrenaline surged through Anna's body, her muscles tense. She knew she couldn't get out through the door, not with Marcelo blocking the way. She needed to think fast. Her eyes swept the room, searching for something she could use. On the table, there was a porcelain mug. It was heavy enough. Without thinking twice, she grabbed the mug and hurled it with all her strength at Marcelo. The object flew through the air, hitting him on the shoulder, causing him to stumble back, surprised, though not hurt enough. But that second of distraction was all Anna needed. She darted toward the door, slipping past him before he could fully react. Her heart raced as she sprinted through Marcelo's apartment corridor, running down the stairs as fast as her legs would carry her. The pounding of her feet echoed through the building, mingling with the desperate sounds of her breath. Marcelo wasn't far behind. She could hear his furious footsteps descending, the sound of someone unwilling to let her escape. Anna reached the ground floor door and yanked it open with a sharp pull. The cold night air enveloped her as she ran out into the street. The distant sound of cars and the wind blowing through the empty streets made her feel as if she were in a nightmare she couldn't wake from. But she couldn't stop. She had to keep running. She crossed the street and darted into an alley between two buildings. Her chest burned from the effort, and panic blurred her sense of direction. The sound of Marcelo's footsteps behind her grew closer, more intense. Suddenly, she saw a metal door on the side of an abandoned building. Anna rushed to it, gripping the handle and twisting it with all her strength. The door gave way, and she slipped inside, closing it behind her as quietly as possible. She quickly backed away, finding refuge in a small, empty room, illuminated only by the faint light seeping through the cracks in the door. Outside, silence reigned, except for the slow, deliberate steps of Marcelo, who had stopped in the alley. She held her breath. She knew he was too close. At any moment, he could open the door and find her. Fear crawled over her skin like a physical, suffocating presence. But as she listened, Marcelo's footsteps finally began to retreat, slowly. Anna exhaled a breath she didn't even know she was holding. She had bought herself some time, but she knew he wouldn't give up easily. She had to find a way to end this. For good. She was no longer willing to live under the shadow of her fear. Somehow, she would fight. Somehow, she would win. Anna could no longer think clearly. Fear and adrenaline coursed through her veins, but at the same time, a new feeling began to form inside her, determination. She was tired of being hunted, tired of being a victim. If she wanted to survive, she had to turn the tables. She needed to stop running and start fighting. After waiting a few minutes to ensure Marcelo had really left, she emerged from the dark room where she had been hiding. The silence in the alley was almost deafening, but Anna knew he was nearby, waiting for the next opportunity. She had to act fast. Her phone was still in her pocket. With trembling hands, she unlocked the screen and began typing a message to the police, explaining what was happening. She needed help and knew she now had enough evidence to incriminate him. However, something inside her told her that Marcelo wouldn't patiently wait for the police to arrive. He had already shown too much determination in his pursuit. If she waited, there might not be another opportunity. Anna then had an idea. Her heart raced even faster with the boldness of the plan forming in her mind. Marcelo's apartment, the place where he controlled the cameras and spied on her life, would also be the site of his downfall. If she could return there and grab something incriminating, something more than just a video image, but physical proof of his obsession, she would have a real chance to end this. Taking a deep breath, she decided to go back. Cautiously, she left the alley and headed back to the building, feeling as though every shadow was conspiring against her. There was no sign of Marcelo outside, but that didn't mean he wasn't lurking nearby. She climbed the stairs as carefully as possible, aware of every step, every sound. When she reached his apartment, the door was still ajar, just as she had left it. Anna's stomach churned, but she knew she had to be quick. She entered slowly, trying to control her breathing, and went straight to the monitors. Next to the equipment, there was a small stack of papers, and to her surprise, the pages were full of notes. He had meticulously documented her routine, every movement described with disturbing precision. As she flipped through the papers, Anna found something even worse: photos of herself, some clearly taken from very close by. Marcelo had followed her on several occasions, capturing images of her leaving home, going to work, even sitting at a cafe with friends. She felt violated, as if her very existence had been completely invaded. But these photos would be her salvation. Anna grabbed the photos and papers, quickly stuffing them into her bag. She was about to leave when she heard a sound. The faint creak of a door. Her heart stopped for a second, and she turned, petrified. Marcelo was there. His eyes were cold, calculating. But this time, something in his gaze was different. He no longer seemed to be playing with her. "You think you can just walk away with that?" he said, his voice low and controlled, but loaded with threat. "I always knew you'd come back here. You could never just leave me." Anna instinctively backed away, her hands trembling as she held the bag with the papers. Marcelo slowly approached, blocking the exit once again. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she couldn't afford to lose control. "Not now. Why are you doing this?" Anna finally managed to ask, her voice weak but filled with a mix of fear and indignation. Marcelo tilted his head as if pondering the question. "I just wanted to protect you," he replied, with an eerie calm. "You never understood, but from the very first moment, I knew I needed to always be close, always watching over you. And now, finally, you know me completely." Anna felt an uncontrollable rage bubble inside her. He was distorting reality, justifying his sick obsession as a form of protection. There was no more logic, no more rational explanation. He was dangerous, and she needed to get out of there. She looked around, searching for a way to escape. Her eyes fixed on a chair beside Marcello's desk, and a desperate idea flashed through her mind. Without hesitation, she grabbed the chair with all the strength she could muster and hurled it at him. Marcello tried to dodge, but the impact struck his arm, causing him to stagger backward. It was enough. Anna rushed toward the door, her heart pounding uncontrollably. She knew she had little time, but she couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. She raced down the stairs with the sound of Marcello close behind, his hurried footsteps echoing in the corridor. When she finally reached the ground floor, she bolted through the front door of the building and ran into the street without looking back. The terror still chased her, but she knew she had the evidence she needed. Marcello wouldn't be able to escape this time. Anna ran until her lungs burned, the cold night air biting her skin. Her thoughts tangled between the urgency to escape and the terror still pulsing in her chest. She knew Marcello was close behind, and the feeling of being hunted every second intensified her desperation. But now, she had something she didn't have before, the evidence. The photos and papers in her bag were the key to ending the cycle of pursuit. She needed to get to the police. As she ran through the nearly deserted streets, Anna spotted a police station ahead, its dim lights still on. Her heart leapt, and she quickened her pace, crossing the entrance. The safe environment, with its cold walls and calm officers, violently contrasted with the chaos inside her. "Please, I need help," she said, almost breathless, as she approached the counter. An officer looked at her in surprise, clearly not used to someone entering so desperate at that time of night. "What happened?" the officer asked, standing up with a serious expression. Anna quickly pulled out her bag and began showing the photos and documents she had taken from Marcello's apartment. "My neighbor, he followed me, watched me. These photos." Her voice faltered for a moment. "He installed cameras in my apartment. He's hunting me." The officer examined the photos and papers with a growing expression of concern. The gravity of the situation became evident, and he quickly called 2 colleagues to review the evidence. "We need a patrol now. She's in danger." The officer, now on high alert, directed Anna to sit down while he made a few calls. Anna trembled, but not from the cold. It was fear finally overflowing, mixed with a quiet rage that had been growing since the moment she discovered the truth. As she waited, flashes of the past days ran through her mind, the small invasions of her privacy she had ignored, the strange feelings, the growing paranoia. Every detail she tried to rationalize now made sense. Marcello had planned everything, spying on her every move, distorting her life as if it were some sick game. The truth had finally been revealed. She wasn't going crazy. He had truly turned her life into a nightmare. "Anna." His voice came from somewhere in the back of the room. Immediate dread paralyzed her. She slowly turned, as if in a nightmare, and there stood Marcello, at the police station door, staring at her. His eyes were no longer those of a friendly neighbor. They were the eyes of a man who had nothing to lose. "You came here?" His voice was low, but laced with restrained anger. "I told you I was protecting you." The officers instantly recognized the threat. One of them stepped forward to restrain him, but Marcello dodged, his movements quick and precise. Everything happened in an instant. Before Anna could process what was happening, he was rushing toward her, a twisted expression of hatred on his face. Anna screamed, rising from the chair, but Marcello was intercepted by one of the officers. The struggle was brief but brutal. Marcello screamed, his eyes fixed on Anna, as the officers pinned him to the ground. The sound of handcuffs snapping shut around his wrists echoed through the room. "I only wanted to take care of you." Marcelo murmured, now defeated. He looked at her with a mixture of pain and obsession, as if he didn't understand why everything was falling apart. Anna felt tears streaming down her face. His words struck her with a disconcerting feeling. The distortion of reality, the way he had manipulated her perception, was deeply disturbing. For a moment, she almost pitied him, but the horror of the situation was greater. Finally, the officers dragged him out, placing him in a squad car. The silence left behind was heavy, as if the world had finally stopped spinning around that cycle of terror. Anna sat down again, still trembling. One of the officers approached, trying to reassure her. "You're safe now. We'll take care of this." His words were gentle, but they couldn't erase the trauma she carried. She knew that from that moment on, nothing would be the same. The terror she had lived through would stay with her for a long time. Even with Marcelo in custody, the feeling of being watched and hunted had seeped into her mind, and it might take years to fade. But there was something liberating about it. She had survived. She had fought. As the first light of morning began to brighten the sky outside, Anna took a deep breath for the first time in days. She was free. Finally.